Welcome to London, the global capital for finance and culture, and one of the world's most popular destinations for business and pleasure. In this episode, the first of a two-part series on the historic British capital, we take a look at the modern, cosmopolitan, and multicultural side of the city, from the parts of London undergoing exciting urban regeneration to its world-famous shopping streets, the home of contemporary British fashion icons. Plus, a peek at the city's eclectic ethnic food scene, and a swing around the West End to enjoy London's legendary theatre district. So join us, I'm David Celdran in London, and this is Executive Class. London. Few cities in the world were as extensively portrayed in photographs, film, and pop culture as the historic British capital. Indeed, the many iconic images of the city are so deeply etched in our collective imagination. From red double-decker buses to red telephone boxes, from Bond Street to Buckingham Palace, Parliament House to the Household Cavalry, and the Dome of St. Paul's to Tower Bridge, we all share the same images of London, even before ever having visited. And though most dedicate their first few trips to London following the well-worn trail of icons, the city has far more to offer than historic landmarks and royal traditions. London today is a hyper-modern, multicultural city, a global capital with a streetscape and skyline that's constantly evolving. The River Thames is the most scenic route through London, and the next best thing to walking along its banks is riding a boat on the river. Before London's iconic tube, taxis, and double-deck buses changed the way Londoners moved around their city, boat ride on the Thames was the fastest and still the most pleasurable way. The Glassroom cruise ship is one of many riverboats that take tourists and nostalgic locals on a cruise of the Thames, the river without which there would be no London whatsoever. The Thames was what first attracted the Romans to the place they called Londinium, and later the Normans, who made it the royal capital of their new kingdom in England. The Thames is still one of the world's most important commercial highways, and you can trace the growth of London's fortunes by looking at the buildings on the north and south banks of the river. The Glassroom cruise is quite literally a floating room of glass, which gives you panoramic views of London's most eye-catching landmarks, from historic structures like Parliament and Big Ben in Westminster, to much newer ones like the giant Ferris wheel, the London Eye, on the South Bank. It's hard not to relive childhood dreams of London while these familiar images from picture books and films unfold before you. Even the tea service makes me feel nostalgic. A well-loved London institution from the middle of the 18th century, thanks to the Duchess of Bedford, who began the afternoon tradition of serving hot tea with finger sandwiches and sweet pastries. In modern, fast-paced London, afternoon tea is an increasingly rare, though still very much cherished tradition. And as if on cue, the modern skyline of the city reveals itself before me. The part of the Thames where the Dome of St. Paul's rises is where the architecture starts to shift. The skyscrapers on the banks of Southwark and the financial district reflect the new architectural trend for organically shaped and eco-conscious buildings, and urban regeneration projects to transform once shabby districts like the docks around London's Tower Bridge into upmarket communities. One of the pioneers of new urban design sweeping across London is Foster & Partners, the architectural firm founded by Sir Norman Foster, one of the most influential architects of modern times. Located on the south bank of the Thames, the Foster & Partners headquarters is where some of the world's most visionary architects, engineers, and urban planners are changing the shape of cities everywhere, as they've done and continue to do in their home turf, London. Despite the Great Fire of London in 1666 and the German Blitz in 1940, the city's skyline has only shifted slowly and incrementally, but the last 25 years have been revolutionary. Today, Sir Norman Foster's creations are just as inseparable from London as St. Paul Cathedral and Westminster Abbey. Some of his works include 30 St. Mary Axe in the Financial District, fondly called a gherkin after its unusual pickle shape, and the new City Hall on the south bank of the Thames, nicknamed the Onion for its round, bulbous structure. Some of his projects have added a fresh look and feel to historic spaces, like the rehabilitation of Trafalgar Square and the new courtyard of the British Museum. Indeed, this mix of ancient and contemporary helps inspire the dynamism and creativity London is known for. Foster's iconic Millennium Bridge connecting St. Paul to the Tate Modern especially. London's only pedestrian bridge and the first new one this side of the Thames in over a century, the Millennium Bridge has brought new life and foot traffic to the Southwark district. The neighborhood where Shakespeare's Globe Theatre stands was once known for its notorious nightlife and its gritty streets. Today, the area is abuzz with art museums, restaurants, and weekenders strolling along one of the most picturesque sections of the Thames. Among Southwark's famous attractions is Borough Market in the shadow of the Shard, London's tallest and one of its most impressive towers. London is all about commerce, of buying and selling and trading, and you feel the energy of money making everywhere, from skyscrapers to street markets like Borough. With an ideal location at the crossroads of the Thames and key commercial roads and bridges, the farmers, butchers, and fishermen of Borough Market have been selling fresh fish and farm produce to locals for more than 1,000 years. The ancient market was relocated to its current site, not far from the original one in the middle of the 18th century, where during the Industrial Age, it grew in size and prominence up until the 1970s, when the popularity of supermarkets and processed food forced most vendors out of business, and eventually the closure of Borough Market. But when a group of artisanal producers decided to reoccupy the abandoned warehouses in the 1990s, they channeled the emerging organic and natural food trend in London and turned Borough Market into one of the city's most popular foodie destinations. Must-buys here include the organic fruits, vegetables, farm-fresh cheese, The market also has a good number of restaurants and stalls representing the diverse population of modern London, and of course, that traditional British favorite, fish and chips. It's a long line, but it must be worth it. You see, this stall over here was shortlisted for the best fish and chip restaurant in the UK for 2020, and the only one in London. Must be good. The Fish Kitchen stall is the takeaway version of its namesake next door, listed by most guides as among the top fish restaurants in London. Your fish is sourced daily from a fishmonger a few steps away in Borough Market, so freshness is guaranteed. Their bestseller is fish and chips. fish and batter with a generous helping of French fries, which the Brits call chips.
The classic fish and chips would have cod as a fish, but nowadays you can choose from a variety of species: halibut, sea bream, hake. But it's still a classic, no matter what you say.
Despite the market's working class origins and street market vibe, the stuff here isn't cheap. £12 for fish and chips is pricey, even for London.
Clearly, Borough Market has become hipsterized, but so long as the good food is there, I'm not complaining.
Indeed, consider your time at Borough Market well spent if you're here as well to watch the latest trends and catch the city's young and successful racially diverse citizens define their modern city to the rest of the world. Up next, we resume our trend watching in London with a trip to the famous shopping district where the city's modern fashion icons are found. That plus an evening at the theater and a taste of the West End. Executive Class returns with more of contemporary London after the break.